You're all set, Senator.
Good morning again, committee and members of the public. So I've asked both David and Damian and Ellen to start putting together our two omnibus bills. And even as late as this morning, there's a suggestion for a third, a consumer protection omnibus bill, but we're definitely going to move forward with marking up an omnibus housing bill and an omnibus economic development bill. So I've asked Commissioner Goldstein to come back and join us and help us help ourselves to sort through some of the ideas from the administration that we'd like to start off seeing in the draft, and then we can proceed once we have the draft in place to go section by section and talk about the specifics of those sections. So Senator Goldstein, is that something you can?
Commissioner Goldstein, you just made me a senator, but
What did I call you?
You called me Senator Goldstein.
Secretary Commissioner.
Thank you, right? Senator, and good morning, senators. And you have an idea? I think we sent some language over to David, but I don't know exactly where that is. So I'll just review my list and you just stop me if you want to ask more questions. I mean, these are not going to be surprises, I don't think.
Yep.
We've reviewed some of them somewhat in different contexts during the week and last week. So I think the first thing was the new and remote worker incentive. We're asking for the short-term occupational list to be removed. We also want to create a permanent program, put this in our base budget at $1 million, and also asking for a $5 million one-time appropriation for fiscal year 23 so that we could seed the program with enough funding to accommodate the robust interest in the program, continuing robust interest. So that's the first thing. And before I move on to the next, should I stop and entertain questions or?
I don't have any questions except just a clarification if you can. As we set it up, the so-called remote worker portion of this program doesn't start till February 1st, which is next week. And then they more or less get merged by July 1st. Is that correct?
So I think what happened in the last year is that it was one appropriation, except in the language in Act 54, if I have that right, the language you actually put forward specific amounts for the specific program. So for example, it was $460 in new worker and $130 in remote work. Yeah. So I guess the question is, if we go forward with the $1 million in base and or the $5 million in one time, do we split it down the middle? Are you?
No, I think at least in my mind, I think this was mostly the House's pushback, but I think the program, and David Hall, I think will confirm this, is a consolidated program at this point. And I think it's more after July 1st, you can qualify under either of the tracks, but it's a first come, first serve combined program. So if there was $6 million available, and $1 million going forward, you'd apply for one program, but there are two sort of paths to eligibility. I think we equalized the grants, the amount for the grants, and we also equalized the type of functions, the type of uses the grants could be used for. So, but for this remainder of this fiscal year, there was a limitation on how much you can do on either. And my understanding is we're almost capped out of the relocated worker, and you have $130,000 to start February 1st on the remote worker.
That is correct.
Is the remote worker program, are you getting any applications? Have you done any web?
We are getting inquiries. We're getting inquiries, but we'll be ready to launch on February 1st. So we've not started processing any applications since we're just following the letter of the statute that it would be open starting February 1st, but there is interest.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, that's one section of our bill.
The other, which I probably won't spend as much time on because it's really a Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing, but it is related because we want to very much combine these efforts where, yes, we've got this relocation incentive, but then there should be marketing and a network available to help the people who are interested in moving into Vermont. So just briefly, that is, if you remember the Stay to Stay initiative, there's a whole network of chambers and RDCs that help people. Like the agency will get calls and people say, I really want to move to Vermont, I need a job. And so in Heather's team, they have worked with the local network to actually help people find jobs. It's an informal funnel right now. And so the idea behind this ask is to formalize that network, fund that network so that we could get a way to get results, track the results, and these people would feel supported rather than it's just a volunteer effort that they're helping to close the deal. So that is a combination of marketing money as well as network funding.
So I think I remember the governor mentioning this in one of his speeches.
Yeah.
What's the price tag?
That one is a total 8.46 million, and it doesn't break it down between network. In my mind, it doesn't break it down between network and marketing. So I think Heather could probably shed a little bit more light on that. But the idea is to do targeted marketing for the trades, for nurses, for other in-demand occupations, especially that there are significant ideas from AHS in terms of recruiting for healthcare workers. So it's really combining the efforts of the incentives that they have for healthcare with the marketing of VDTM.
So is this base funding and is it?
This is it's not base. I think this is one-time general fund.
And it's 8.5, did you say, Joan?
8.46.
We need one of Heather's fancy charts here.
Yeah, the infographic, right?
Her infographic. Is she? I assume she's developing one.
Oh, actually, yeah, we do have one. I actually don't know if it's finalized yet, but that'll be a great takeaway. And as soon as I get that, I could actually send that to you when we have that.
We would appreciate that.
Yeah, that'll include everything, including some of the housing and community development. It'll be a very good picture, but this is meant to at least go through the list and take questions.
Yeah, no, this is great.
We lost Michael, I think just with technical issues. I had a question. I don't know if Allison, you're taking over for now.
I'm taking over and we happily have a quorum. Oh,
There's
here he
Michael.
comes back. Michael, are you back?
He's not on audio yet.
Okay. Okay. What's your question, Ms. Keisha?
So I really would like to know the breakdown between the network and the marketing. I think that's really critical. I could see, I mean, I don't disagree with the ask. I really like the program. I think it could use some more check-in points, and evaluation should be included in this as well. After someone's here for a year, 2 years, 3 years, I have talked to people, particularly people of color, who've come through the program and really want to share their experience and why they may not stay after a few years. And so would really like to see more, like, this is a big ask. It's not it doesn't seem without merit, but it does seem like we should really dig into making this program effective and for everyone if we're going to do that. So I'd really like to see that. And I would not disagree with someone who goes through the Stay program potentially being almost like automatically eligible for this relocation grant. I think it's a way to offer it to them at the end of their visit in a way that might make it feel easier to move.
And Keisha, could we just tag that, because I would hope that we would have time for witnesses on relocation workers. So would you be kind enough to keep a list of the recipients of the
Yeah.
remote or relocation or new worker grants and keep them and get them to Scott and contact so that we can have them.
Sure, we could do that. So let me just make sure we're not conflating two different things on the list. There is a breakdown of what is going to be available for the actual grant to the recipient. That is the $1 million budget, base budget ask, and the $5 million one-time appropriation. That is the grant. That is the relocation grant. This second thing that I'm talking about is about marketing and developing the network around the state to help us close the deal, as it were, with people who are interested in coming into the state.
And that's
So
8 million?
And that's the 8.46. And part of that is marketing, and part of it is the network development of the folks who are helping us.
Yes, I'd really like the breakdown there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, so I think what I suggest, I think that's perfectly fair. I think that Heather Pelham should come in and probably talk about that. Is really more, we've kind of separated out, the marketing and the targeted marketing, and they are maintaining the contact with the chambers who are doing a lot of that work. And so I think that she would be more than willing to come in and expand a little bit on that.
So that's
I just wanted to make the clarity of the 8 million does not include the grant. It's additive to the grant.
Can
But
I,
that's 14 million overall is what it
can
sounds like.
I interrupt
Right.
for a second? Is David Hall with us?
Yes,
Hi,
he
Dave.
is.
Yes, I'm here.
So David, just as a heads up, what I'd like to see in the vaguest or general form possible, when we start doing this omnibus bill early drafts, there would be like a section on tourism and marketing, and it would say something like there is 8.46 million appropriated to be granted out to chambers and RDC for networking and marketing to promote programs like Stay to Stay. Just so we have a paragraph in there, and then we'll bring Heather in and we'll see if we need to flesh out more details.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I'm sorry I lost my connection, but I was asking, is this general funds or this 8.4?
This is general fund, because Arpa specifically prohibits relocation monies.
And I know we did something for chambers and along this line, $60,000 each or something in the last couple of years. Is this 8.46 above their base budget? And is this going to be treated as an increase in their base, or is this one-time money?
This is one-time money.
Okay. And is there a base budget for similar things already?
No, there is not.
And
So
there's only 1 million in this request of the 14 total. There's only 1 million for base budget. Is that right, Joan?
That is correct.
Well, I view these two things as separate, quite frankly, but anyhow, okay, they'll be in two different sections anyhow of the omnibus bill. And it may just go in the budget bill, but I just want to have these ideas in front of us in the bill. Okay.
Understood. Okay, the next thing I have on the list is to bring back, once again, the project-based TIF proposal. I know that you all were very much in favor, and we appreciate that. I think it died in the House. We've changed
You lost Megan.
and we lost Megan. I don't think she wanted to come back and also pitch for it for a fourth year.
We didn't lose, the Vermont didn't lose her, however. it's
Vermont did
important.
not lose her. That is correct.
So we can put that in for discussion. The question I have, and correct me if I'm wrong, this probably is something that is needed and good in the long term. But I look at the Westford and the Middlebury projects, and it seems like it'd be a lot simpler just to fund them with ARPA or infrastructure dollars.
Yeah.
Be done with it.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I think that's what kind of slowed it down last year. Here's the thing. I mean, a project-based TIF would be more of a more permanence. It's not like, the ARPA money has to be obligated by a certain date. Some of the ARPA money needs match. There's a lot of different requirements around it. This just gives this is a tool that could be used going forward, especially for small towns. They're not getting that much money. So that is what we're pitching. And once again, and we'll have probably towns lined up that are still interested. And Abby Sherman, you should get to meet if you haven't met her already, who took over the role of executive director of VEPSI from when Megan left. So we still feel very strongly about that, to have a kind of permanent kind of tool that smaller towns can use.
Yeah.
And also to extend it to the areas surrounding the village center, since in so many small towns, the village center is a block. So just to bear that in mind.
Mr. Chair, I think that's the important difference here. I really think this is for the future. ARPA money, I hope, will be used for some of these small towns now. And this, and in fact, those projects will be great poster children for the continued financial support Vermont gives to a mini TIF program.
They also could be used in conjunction with ARPA. So to the extent they're getting ARPA infrastructure, they have this other mechanism. So again, these things are all pieced together, some of these infrastructure projects. So the other thing that we're calling Grand List Enhancement Program is a new idea. And the idea around that is, if you talk to somebody who's trying to redevelop property in an area, but as an example, they may not need infrastructure, they may not need a municipality, we have nothing to offer, right? So there's no incentive to develop in these towns that are really suffering. So we had tax department do a run of all the towns in Vermont to look over the last 10 years and how many of them have a declining or a stagnant grand list valuation. And there were too many, way too many for any of us to feel comfortable. When I say that, I say, let's say if you use 1% as a stagnant grand list, in other words, they grew 1% over the last 10 years, you're talking about over 150 towns.
Wow.
So that is a stunning data point in and of itself. And we thought, if we could provide ARPA money to people who want to redevelop properties within those, what we're calling the declining or stagnant grand list valuation towns, that we could get funding. I believe that all of a sudden I'm having a blank. I think the budget ask was 20. First, I thought it was 30 million to do this program. Now, the caveat with that is the same caveat as capital investment program, because it is similar. These would be capital investments. These would be projects that would add to the property valuation in those towns. And so, as you know, and I've talked about before, there are some very stringent guidelines that ARPA has handed us. And so it would have to meet those ARPA eligibility guidelines. And namely, there's like a simple test, which is it in a bruised industry like hospitality, arts and culture, recreation? There are a few that has a sort of a simplistic kind of approval of eligibility. Others, you'd have to prove what the losses were in that particular industry. So we're learning more about how we generate what they call a class or a group of industries or businesses within industries that have had a disproportionate impact. So we're working through that, but we do think this might be a way to incentivize investment in some of these towns that are really suffering. We could make a case that is a class, and I have to run that by AOA and Guidehouse. Is just sort of, if we take these towns that have this declining grand list valuation, it would stand to reason that the people who live in that town are bearing a greater burden. And if you don't have grand list growth, you really, each individual is bearing more of the burden. So this is an idea to try to change that trajectory.
So could I just ground this in reality a little bit? So if a town that has low grand list appreciation wants to apply for some of this $20 million, let's say for a co-working space to be built in the town center right from scratch, they could go to this fund and get it totally paid for. And how is that different from the capital investment program?
Yeah, like I said, it is very similar to capital investment. And I think what we're going to do is either do a prioritization for these towns that have declining grand list, but we do view it as um, a similar exercise, meaning, let's look at the as complete appraisal value of that particular redevelopment or development and pay a percentage of that increase, right? So that is, to me, an incentive that could attract investment that we may otherwise not get. In other words, doing nothing, these towns may continue on that trajectory, which is not a positive one. And as you look at the list, you could see that, many of these towns and villages are the rural towns, are the non-Chittenden and Franklin County towns. So
So do you have
in
any
terms,
detail that you could provide that we might want to put in legislation as to what are the qualifications and how the projects get approved and in what amount?
yeah, I think we do. I'm not sure if it made it into, we had a draft sort of legislative language for these, and I just don't know where that is. I
Okay.
think we've sent it to David. I'm not sure though. I couldn't
Okay,
swear on that, but
maybe if
we
you
do
could-
have something, and we want to make it similar to, like, the biggest hurdle on these is ARPA eligibility. Then the next hurdle is, what is the project? What additional value will it bring based on like what standard industry practices to assess and appraise and as complete valuation, and then the appropriate percentage that we would pay to them. One rule of thumb is what's the sort of average, property tax for properties around the state. Let's say that's 2%, and we give that benefit out 10 years. So maybe 20% of their approval. Now, I say loosely that it's based on capital investment because they will all be capital investment projects in order to be eligible for this. I don't want to say just put it into capital investment because the way it stands now, as you know, we would like changes to that so that we're not doing calculations of net fiscal impact based on payroll growth, because as we know, some of the capital investments don't necessarily depend on payroll growth. So it's just an acknowledgement that grand list growth is an important economic development initiative in and of itself.
Okay. Well, if you can get us the language you have or some sort of a couple of paragraphs describing the guardrails or parameters of this program, we can start putting that into our bill.
The next is, of course, capital investment. That we do want the changes that that don't require us to use net fiscal impact as the determining award factor or as the prioritization factor. And I know that that's something that you want to talk more about. I'm sure Tom could talk about it, but just as an example, if we think we really need to fund childcare, I just saw a childcare application that's probably going to get a tenth of what they need to finish their project. That is not a good use of recovery money to underfund it so substantially that the project's in question. We also think that net fiscal impact is really a good model for determining incentives, that we're using general fund money because you want to determine you're giving out $1 of general fund to get $1 back in tax revenue, but that's not really, in fact, probably contrary to the intent of ARPA funding, because it is about emergency relief and recovery from the emergency. Additionally, the ARPA eligibilities are so strict that we have enough of a threshold just getting through that. To add on additional state threshold, I think is, it just prevents us from delivering on the promise of these ARPA funds. So I know that we'll be talking more about that, but
Let's talk about, I did see the language on this and I was struck by, it sounded like, my recollection of last year, we capped the grants at 1.5 million, and much to the chagrin of my vice chair and I think the administration, and now you're lowering that cap to 1 million. Is that right?
Yeah, we're lowering it because in the ARPA eligibility guidelines, any project over 1 million, you have to substantiate considerably. You have to write up for each individual project a justification to Treasury. So it's onerous, and it would bring so much attention to every single individual project. Do we want that sort of scrutiny? And I think in actuality, of all the 77 projects that we've seen, I think there's 2 that actually net fiscal impact would be over 1 million. So we're not impacting the majority. The biggest impact on this is the net fiscal impact calculation. It's really bringing down the amount of the grant possibility.
Right. But just food for thought, what if we gave some sort of waiver authority to go above the $1 million? So if you got a really good project and you were willing to take the extra effort and justification under ARPA, you wouldn't be foreclosed from doing that.
Yeah, I would support that, but the project obviously would have to be willing to undergo the scrutiny, the additional ARPA federal scrutiny. The other thing I just tag on to you, your question, Mr. Chair, is, as Joan already knows, I mean, we were hoping these were going to be regionally transformational projects. And sadly, the Treasury rules are curtailing some of our grand, are really think big objectives with these grants. So these are a little more locally transformative and less big impact regionally transformative, although some of them have impact beyond their towns, from what I understand from Joan, some of these applications.
But, I mean, it expressly states, it's unfortunate, but in ARPA, it expressly states you cannot fund just general economic development projects.
Right.
So,
I think we're having to scale down, which is really hard for me. As you know, Mr. Chair, I'm having a hard time scaling down my kind of transformative, think big Daniel Burnham ideas and scale it down a bit to make it ARPA eligible. And I think but I think it would be great to have some flexibility for the projects that are really big, that we could even think about having a grant that would be higher for the projects that are willing to take on that scrutiny and that could possibly be a little bit bigger in scope and scale.
Like I said, I think that the bigger delta is not the under 1 million. The bigger delta is the net fiscal impact compared to what they asked for. It's tremendous.
We're having Tom Cavett in this week.
Okay.
Talk to us about that. Is there any sort of way to get around the
Sorry.
Okay, it must be Joan or Michael.
It's not me.
Oh, okay.
So you could mute for a second. You get around it by having, in terms of a regional proposal, could like 5 towns from Windsor County each put in $1 million request and say it's going to be in some ways our contribution to the Weathersfield portion of the new building. I don't know. I'm just trying to think out loud. Is that possible?
I was afraid to unmute. Are you saying if several towns, well, first, let me just be clear that municipalities are not eligible under the capital investment program. We made this only for nonprofits and for-profits because of the municipal has other pots of money.
You could think about Park Street School, Michael, instead. Think Springfield.
Okay.
Right. And so
Well,
we do have good projects that will have transformative effect. It's just that it's not what you think. Like you would imagine that there would be these multi-town proposals, but in some cases they're very small. Really, it's to change our thinking on this from that to economic recovery, because the people who are presumptively eligible are the industries that were most severely impacted: hospitality, arts and culture, recreation. Childcare is presumptively eligible, not as a business, but as the service they provide to households. So, it is a different take on it, which we've, now begun to understand much more wholly since they've issued the final rule.
So let me just ask this question, Commissioner. I know there's the statement that the new VITA program is economic recovery, and we're moving away from the restrictions of the GAP program. But just so I'm clear, this capital investment program, it's not, in my mind, it's not economic recovery in a strict sense, because it's new capital construction for an expanded empire or enterprise
Mhm.
or over existent. Or you're saying it could be like, we're gonna tear down this childcare center and build a new one, and it's going to save us all kinds of money in efficiency, and that in essence will help our ability to live day to day, as opposed to expand our business.
Yeah, I mean, it could be used for expansion. It just that it would have to be for in those industries that were most severely impacted by COVID. So it's not, only working capital is the answer to recovery. There is a segment that needs working capital, and that's what we're thinking about for the forgivable loan through VITA. Capital investment is still an eligible expenditure. It's just that it is whittled into, it's most targeted, I'd say it that way. It's most targeted at those that suffered the most, in terms of the industries that suffered the most. So it does recognize, it's not saying, yeah, we're going to replace your revenue. It's saying you've had this decline and you want to make improvements so that you could continue to grow your business or grow your nonprofit, or mitigate, or expand space so you can mitigate other types of health issues. So it is just a different, it is prohibited from just general economic development expansions. This is really predominantly about not just revenue loss. Like in some cases, yeah, we do have manufacturers that are applying, and manufacturing lost some labor of some workforce. That could be a consideration. So there's going to be kind of rankings that, the ones who are presumptively eligible, obviously that's the easiest low risk to fund because they are recognized nationally as having been impacted. Secondarily, we'll have to piece together the justification on others, because if we see that the labor force, declined by so much, then there is a reason to believe that, yeah, they're in their effort to recover, this project may help. So I'm generalizing just so that it's kind of palatable, so you can understand what we're going through. But this was the journey with where we started and where we are now in the interim final rule to final rule. And we have enough applications from those presumptively eligible. I think we have enough applications from those to start prioritizing those. Now, are they going to all pass the transformative test? Probably not, but
just to follow up, so I'm still trying to get my arms around this. If I running a hotel and I'm having trouble getting help, and I say the only way I can get help is to up their salaries by 50%, and in that way I can survive, I think the VITA program might be a possible place for those people to go. Could they get money from the capital investment program if they come in and say, for us to survive, we need to increase pay, and we're going to use the money you give us to increase pay?
not in the capital investment program, because it is about capital investments, and payroll would be working capital.
Okay, got it. Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Okay,
Okay.
so let's keep going. We'll go on a little bit longer.
So I think that's it from the economic development perspective. I know that you've had Josh in, and there are a number of other things on housing and downtown tax credit, the Vita forgivable loan. Yes, we're working with Vita to come up with what that system would be, but it is to take care of those that still have ongoing pandemic impacts, and it's just for working capital. It would be forgivable if they've proven, that they've used it on operational expenses. So in terms of working out those terms, that is an ongoing conversation, but no doubt we think we could come to some mutually acceptable solution.
Okay. So on the economic recovery grants, you're not proposing at this time any changes to those qualifications. Is it a work in progress? What you're going to do with that money? I mean, we have an opinion here that you shouldn't be doing that unilaterally. And if it's going to be, the idea is to move it into, to free up ARPA dollars for capital investment or for the Vita program, are you going to suggest a dollar amount of that $26 million? In other words, you're going to, at some point, you're going to come into the Appropriations Committee and say, we're holding on to $26 million and we don't want it under the GAP program to sit there for the next 5 years, for 4 years or 2 years for people to still come in making applications under that program.
Yeah, and I guess, at this point, you all know what our preference would be. It's just a question of, can it be transferred into capital investment? And I think that was a question, I guess, for budget adjustment, or I actually don't know technically, but we definitely don't want to just leave it there. That would not be our intent. That our intent is more to switch it over to capital investment. It'll help with the first round. And if we have additional money, we could do a second round, but I think I'm kind of asking you all, like, what do you want to do?
Okay, so we have to wrestle with that. But as far as budget adjustment goes, I don't think there was any movement on that line item on the House's budget adjustment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, and practically speaking, you're not getting a lot of applications right
Like
now.
nothing.
So
Yeah.
if we fixed it in the budget bill and took a little bit more time with it, we could do that as well without having major
Right.
impact. Because we're not going to fund these new programs until the budget bill anyhow. So it needs to come together by the budget bill. Okay.
Or a fast track, a fast track economic development bill, because we still have people in recovery. And so if we are going to possibly make the Vita forgivable loan program the source for helping make people whole and recover from the pandemic, particularly in the sectors we've discussed, we would want to do that ASAP, because this was money we had hoped would be out the door last fall.
So the tension here is, I agree with that. The tension here, I would think, is that it sounds to me like everybody, myself included, likes what is being talked about in Vita, I think, as opposed to the stagnant program that exists now. We need more information on Vita to launch that and fully fund it, et cetera, et cetera. But in the interim, one option would be to change some of the criteria in the, not all of them, but some of the criteria in the GAP program and see if people come forward in the next few months. But it sounds like the administration is not really interested in us doing that.
Is that fair, Joan?
I just don't know what you would achieve, like how quickly that money could be put to work, as opposed to putting that money to work right here, right now in the capital investment program. Like, one thought would be, if you transferred it to capital investment, we used what we needed, we probably wouldn't use all of it, and the remainder could go to Vita. I mean, just changing the ERG will take some time. Then we'll have to put it into the system, and then we're back into that business. You're probably talking, even if you did a quick bill, like last year, the quick bill ended up being in April. We ended up launching in,
Got
I
it.
don't know, it took us a
Okay,
while. So
you said that a couple of times. I didn't understand. You said if you put it into capital investment, I'm not sure that that's being seriously considered in the Budget Adjustment Act, unless I'm wrong. I don't get the sense that on the Senate side is, I don't think it was in the House side, was it?
it wasn't in the House side. It would be up to you all, I think.
Okay. All right, so it is now time to adjourn, I think, unless I missed some other questions.
Senator Ram has her hand
Well,
up.
I'm sorry,
just-
Sarah, go ahead.
I mean, just for when Joan is back here, I just really feel like I need to say now, before these conversations continue any further, that no matter if it's Department of Labor or ACCD, I am thinking a lot about the emergency needs of businesses and families related to COVID and related to employees being out and childcare is being closed. And I know I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around $14 million for stay to stay right now when people are in crisis. So I know that there's proposals that are coming forward from the business community to talk about that emergency support for families in crisis due to COVID and the ongoing pandemic. And I just think ACCD needs to come forward and be part of that conversation too. I don't know that the fund is going to make sense to go through Department of Labor, but that's where my head is at. I just can't talk about stay to stay in the millions of dollars when the people are in crisis right now.
Well,
I think I agree, there's a timing issue here. Obviously, the stay to stay money wouldn't come until July.
Yeah.
well,
And it's hard to figure out how to, and we're talking about things like paid leave and sick days, and I don't know what the timing of those, how quickly they can come together. But it sounds like in terms of the business community, in terms of their immediate needs, it sounds like it's hard to turn on a dime on the economic recovery grant program. We might start from whole cloth and put out a separate bill, either a mini bill or our economic omnibus bill that could go somewhat faster than the budget, perhaps, but there's all kinds of complications with that. I don't know. I don't sense, and I'm not pointing a finger, but I'm not getting, I don't know if you are, getting lobbied hard by the business community for what the quick fix is. I can't wrap my head around it yet. No, they haven't come together and said, here's a plan that will work for us, and that doesn't require an immediate somehow change of formula or statute. And so I think there is a plan that might take a couple of months longer, but
I
it's
think,
hard, as you know, Keisha, very well, that if this was going to happen in quick order, the advocates and the administration would have had this on our plate in November. And we're still trying to sort out what this is that we're trying to get to. I mean, the closest thing I've heard is Senator Clarkson's Arts Council bill.
Mhm.
yeah,
At least
our art bill is a very direct ask for very direct need right now.
It got
But-
put in writing. It's in bill
Mhm.
form. It will be in our bill to look at. So
But
Main Street Alliance sent us something that I looked at on the break, and I think they're
Right.
it's hard for anyone to hold on to their business, let alone talk to other businesses, let alone do it in the changing environment of the pandemic. So they have come forward today with something that I think we should give consideration and feels like a priority to me.
and as I said, I have that, so I'll look at that. But if people
we all have it.
ideas that they want in this bill next week and the week after, as we go through these, maybe there'll be choices to peel them off and say, let's send this to appropriations right now. And let's see if we can get it done in 6 weeks or something like that, you know?
Right. And quite honestly, that's why if we are going to sort of, because of the criteria challenge, abandon the ERG grants as a viable option for getting direct recovery money out to all the people in need, that's why I would put the goose up the fire under the development of the VITA forgivable loan program, because it sounds like we're going to transition those people still in heavy need into applying for that program. So I'd love to stand that up ASAP, because that's the best thinking I've heard so far on how to meet the needs that people still have, and our creative sector bill, which is direct appropriations. And so I hear you, Keisha, but we haven't been able to solve the undo the knot of the criteria challenge with the ERG grant. So I think that's our best work for the moment. And the lodging and restaurant businesses came back with wanting to go back to rounds 1 and 2, the criteria in rounds 1 and 2, and I don't think people were willing to go back to that. Is that fair, Joan?
Well, as you know, I mean, we would love to do that, but we're continually criticized that those were not the best and prudent ways to distribute funds. So
Right.
that's why we didn't recommend it coming in.
But that's where the
files,
limit,
right?
that's the industry. That was the lodging industry's response. People really, the flexibility of rounds 1 and 2 were, of course, appreciated by the recipients, but not necessarily by the economic eyes that were assessing that program.
Anyhow, we're going to have to end it here. We only have a few more minutes. We have Chair and I, Vice Chair and I have to meet with Nathan. So we'll see you all on the floor at 1. Tomorrow we're doing all day on ADUs. We have a great list of witnesses. I'm hoping there'll be a separate section in the bill on encouraging ADU development quickly. And we also have Tom Cavett in at the end for, I think, 20 minutes to talk about the changes the administration would like to see in the capital investment program. So with
Thank
that,
you.
I bid you adieu.
Thank you.
And we'll see you